Hello Unigame fans, fresh off a huge week of new releases, we have another gem-packed week, so you will be spoiled for choice with 37 new releases of interest, beginning with Veritus, a stunning 8-bit pixel art action-adventure game in which you are exploring the forgotten castle of the God of Shadows. There's a little bit of mystery surrounding this game and its many characters, which is for the better in my opinion, since they don't straight up explain the entire game in the trailers, with this being the direct sequel to Prodigal from 2020, but is much improved visually. I've had my eye on Abathor for quite a while, since this self-styled 2D arcade action platformer looks to be nailing exactly what they are going for and would not be out of place in arcades, in which 4 heroes battle enemies in a desperate defense of Atlantis. It has that awesome throwback pixel art style, and the 4-player co-op is interesting, where you could have told me that this is a beat 'em up and I would not have blinked, but as a side-scroller, all players and enemies are on the same plane, which might make combat feel a little bit more intuitive. The boss fights in this appear to be a highlight, since there is variety in designs as well as concepts, where it is not just limited to the giant boss spawning on the right hand side of the screen and looks like fun with friends. This video is brought to you by The Operator, an immersive narrative puzzle adventure that draws influence from X-Files and Her Story. Coming to us from indie developer Bureau 81, you play as the newest operator in the Federal Department of Intelligence, or FDI, and have the job of assisting field agents in investigating crimes. But of course, there's a greater conspiracy afoot that leads straight into the heart of the FDI. Use your terminal and software to dig into files, find information and clues, solve puzzles and uncover the mystery. If you do get stuck, there's a friendly hint system to nudge you along and will be for fans of detective games. This releases on July 22nd, 2024, so if interested, pick it up via the link in the description below. This video is also brought to you by Linkito, a logic puzzle game where every move depends on the ability to connect blocks and to understand intricate electrical mechanisms. Coming to us from a solo developer out of France named Chimera Games and publisher Playdigious. You are making your way up the ranks of the Albatross Company, a totalitarian company state, foiling their plans one puzzle at a time to reclaim your freedom. As in all good puzzle games, things start off relatively simple, with repairing basic electronic devices, which then ramps up into controlling robots, defusing bombs and breaking secret codes, with it also having a level editor for players to create puzzles for each other. This releases on July 23rd, 2024, so if it sounds good, pick it up via the link in the description below as well. Here's a game which I've been looking forward to, primarily because of developer Silver Lining Studio, who are best known for Behind the Frame, The Finest Scenery, a narrative adventure game about a painter which sports an almost Studio Ghibli-like quality to the animations. And while the art style of the Star Named EOS is different, it should be telling an equally heartwarming tale. You play as a young photographer searching for his absent mother, following a series of photos that she sent to get on her trail. There's a mixture of puzzles and photography in this game, with a central mystery to uncover, and will be for cozy game fans. Speaking of cozy games, a farming game which I have my eye on is Farlands, one that looks like Stardew Valley in space, but might have its own mechanics and systems to keep things interesting. For one, you have left your busy life in an overcrowded metropolis in favour of a simpler, more rural life on your own planet, having to tame the wilderness and do stuff like fishing, but can also hop into your ship to explore other planets. There are aliens to meet, befriend and trade with perhaps a more sinister reason as to why your planet was sold for that cheap, so if you love farming games like me, this will be of interest. The release of Exophobia is finally upon us, a sci-fi retro-inspired first-person shooter with Metroidvania-inspired elements in terms of progression. Set on board a crashed human spaceship which has now become infested with aliens, fight your way through the different levels of the ship, searching for human survivors and to find out about their backstories, all while you master an upgradable alien weapon to escape the ship. The Metroidvania inspiration comes from unlocking new abilities for the gun, which can be used both in combat but also in exploration, which allows you to access new areas. There will be boss fights and plenty of challenge, with the throwback pixel art style and choice of color palettes being interesting, so let's hope it delivers an all-action experience. There are so many games of interest this week that even games outside of my top 10 will be great, including A Ranger, a role puzzling adventure, a game that has the attention of many since it's a puzzle adventure exploration game in which you do not simply move your character but scroll the entire row or column of tiles that she is on. You can loop around the world when you come to the end of it, which should lead to interesting implications since I have only seen this mechanic being used in self-contained puzzle games, but not as more of an open world level design, so I'm waiting for my mind to get blown by this. It also has quite the pedigree, coming to us from the artist of Braid, the designer of Ethereal and the writer of Kato, and is telling a tale of self-discovery as our misfit protagonist finds her way in the world and looks like my gem. I'm a fan of tower defense titles and there are quite a few this week, one of which is Artisan TD, an amazing looking, amazing type tower defense game in which the towers that you build can affect the pathing of enemy units. Interestingly, there will be wall sections that get built in between your towers, so you can cordon off an area which apparently becomes a farm to generate more resources for you, so there's more to this game than meets the eye, with it having that modern feel to the game, which I believe is due to the use of Unreal Engine 5, so it looks solid all around. The developer of this game forgot to change the release date on Steam, but as far as I know, Broken Lens is still releasing on July 22nd, and is a hidden object game in which you play as a little robot who has a broken lens on one side, having to spot the difference and to identify the anomalies. It is simple in concept, and although it has the curious phrasing of using anomalies, more commonly seen in horror adjacent titles like The Exit 8, I don't believe this is a horror game, but rather one that features awesome cartoony art. There are also lost pages of a book that you need to find that might uncover more of the story, or be a Tunic-like in-game manual to uncover secrets, so it looks like a curiosity for sure. Farming game fans are also spoiled for choice this week, since we have the release of Critter Crops, a game that, honestly, isn't the most visually appealing, kind of having flash game vibes in the art and one-tone colours for each of the objects, but the gimmick here is that you play as a witch with the ability to grow magical critters, so what's not to love? Yes, this has a similar premise to Weyrdlets, but real-time action-adventure style combat, and the art style does grow on you the more you look at it. Furthermore, I don't think that this is a sandbox farming game, since the developer talks about leveling up your critters and accessing the different parts of the map while restoring the island, uncovering the mystery of your own past, and to welcome the unwelcomed, whatever that means, so it might just be a quote-unquote completable farming game that has its appeal. I'm a sucker for match 3 games, going back to Bejeweled, but also Puzzle Quest and 10 Million, with a more meta-looking one of these being Crossover Roll for Initiative. For some reason, your tabletop RPG character sheet, yes, that piece of paper, is now under attack by enemies, so you need to find matches in your tray of dice to get resources to defeat them, which sure does remind me of Puzzle Quest. There's also an action strategy tower defense element here, since enemies are attacking in real time, so you cannot just sit back and relax, looking to be a cool, weird thing that I want to check out. The Earth Defense Force series is known for being esoteric and weird, and they are up to number 6 and the overall 11th entry in the franchise, counting spin-off titles, where this first released on PlayStation 4 and 5 in Japan in 2022, but this is the worldwide release, and apparently this developer is just 25 people, so you might consider them to be an indie studio. If you're not familiar, this is about playing as an EDF soldier taking on giant bugs in order to save the world, and has a kind of insane sci-fi story that you would expect to go along with a game like this. However, it is tongue-in-cheek, so it is satirical, and while I wouldn't go expecting Helldivers 2 going into this game, I think it should be charming in its own way. I just talked about Ells, Tales, Egg when covering the surprise releases of June, a survival horror clicker game, and the developer is already back with, I presume, the next entry titled Ells, Tales, Chicken. Again, it's a survival horror title with their signature art style, but in which you play as a chicken going through a maze, Sukuban block-pushing puzzle style, although honestly, I don't quite know what to expect based on screenshots and the trailer, which can be a good thing, I suppose. On the polar opposite end of things in terms of vibes is Été, which means summer in French, a narrative puzzle adventure game set in Montreal and is all about painting, not just of brush on canvas, but also of colouring the entire city as well. It has a very unique visual style that taps on watercolours, where restoring colour and life to an otherwise colourless world is always fun to do in games. There are also straight up normal paintings that you can create, some in the form of commissions for NPCs, which you can develop a relationship with, also having an inspiration notebook, decor for your studio, and so much more. It really looks like the ideal summer game, not only due to the setting, theme, and time period, but also because you're encouraged to explore and to stop and smell the flowers, so to speak, looking very relaxing indeed. This next title kind of went viral when it was first shown off, since Exhausted Man is a physics comedy puzzle game about a very exhausted man crawling around his house attempting to get things done, with the physical comedy of the snake-like human being the main draw. I suppose this has mass appeal since, after all, who doesn't feel tired all the time, with I believe there being a checklist of tasks to get done, but it's just a weird game worth a look. One look at Forgotten Mines and I immediately knew that it was my jam, being a small-scale, turn-based tactical roguelite with a pixel art style. 1 millennia ago, a mining expedition went too deep, stumbling upon the gates of hell itself, which then led to the mine being overrun with monsters. Now, as the leader of the united Dwarven clans, reclaim the Forgotten Mines and return them to their rightful owner, the Dwarves. Interestingly, this has over 50 types of enemies and bosses, including orcs, goblins, the undead, demons, and more, and apparently also has dozens of character classes, including not just warrior, rogue, and mage, but white mage, planeswalker, knight, brute, squire, assassin, and more. There's also meta progression in between runs, since the precious gems that you can mine can unlock new gear and character classes, along with interesting combat tactics in a dynamically changing battlefield. As a side note, do note that the play area is an 8x8 grid, which, not coincidentally, is the same as Into the Breach, where you will see a lot of this when it comes to tactics games, so look out for that the next time around, but this looks great and is the hidden gem of the week. The developer of Goblin Auto Club Manager sent me a key and it worked in getting me to cover this game, since it has the description, imagine building fantastic cars out of junk and then letting idiots drive them, so of course I was in. This also self-describes as an auto battler but with racing instead of battling, so you can construct cars out of junk and then let the AI-controlled goblins drive them, with the hopes of winning the race to get more money to buy more parts and so on, as you work your way up the different racing leagues, and it's a weird game that is so indie games. Similarly, the developer of Havoc reached out as well, and it's a 5v5 tactical first-person shooter that sure looks like Counter-Strike to me, down to having a plant the bomb objective, but also additional modes like Capture the Flag. It will be free to play and there will be weapon skins, so I'm not really sure how they intend to take any market share from Counter-Strike, but it looks well made and it's free, so why not give it a go. Here's a weird one in Let's Minesweeper, one that takes things to the extreme in being Minesweeper but online, in which a game can have 48 million tiles and 10 million mines, so how's that for crazy? Apparently, you are uncovering some sort of grander image but won't be able to tell since you're playing on a very micro scale, but it is still interesting to see as a social experiment if anything. Massively multiplayer online Minesweeper was not on my bingo card for 2024, but then again, why not, which is part of the appeal of indie games. I'm not quite sure what they were doing with the trailer for Ninja Slayer NEO-SAITAMA in Flames, since it is very difficult to see the game itself, which is a side-scrolling action platformer based on the Ninja Slayer manga, one which I'm not familiar with, but it sure looks sleek and stylish. The UI is a lot to take in however, so much so that it kind of obscures the action, so it's a weird one for sure. Another
farm simulation RPG
of interest is the long-in-development Ova Magica, which kind of looks like Stardew Valley meets Pokemon, adding in a slime taming, combat and breeding element to the otherwise familiar farming genre. You are tending to your farm to grow crops, getting to know the locals, and maybe even fall in love, with your own player housing to customize along with a plethora of other activities like fishing. The slime combat part is interesting since you are delving into dungeons and taking part in turn-based combat with an extensive breeding system to get custom slimes, although for the most part they are all blob-shaped, so there isn't that much variety. This will be an early access release with what appears to be the bulk of the game already there, only missing endgame content, final hard events and more blob worlds to explore, but should be a good pick for the week. The release of Punch Club 2 last year has been a success, with the cyberpunk setting of this fighting management game being a welcome change, so here's their first paid DLC titled Iron Fist. This adds about 6 hours of gameplay, which involves building and customizing your own fighting robot, leading it to victory in the Robot League. What that means is its own robot tech tree with attacks, defenses, and modifiers, so it's an additional system on top of the base game and even has a narrative element since you need to figure out the plans of the secret Robo Society and to stop them before it's too late. Here's a title that might just go under the radar since Rawmen Food Fighter Arena is releasing on PC as an Epic Games Store exclusive, and I don't know about you, but I'm not hearing that much in terms of chatter when it comes to that storefront. It will be a free-to-play multiplayer combat game about soup, and does have Splatoon vibes since you are skating around on soup to increase your movement speed, for example, but the objective is not to cover the entire area but to defeat your enemies instead. Of course, there are additional game modes which might not be a good thing if there's a minimum number of players to keep things interesting, but since it's free, no harm giving it a shot. Another DLC of interest is Ready or Not Home Invasion, with the game having you playing as SWAT team police officers in high-stakes situations, and this DLC is set during a state of emergency after a devastating hurricane. Massive property and environmental damage has occurred and homes are being broken into, where your squad is then called in along with reports of looters and gang-related activities, so you will have plenty on your hands. The base game is great, so if the missions here are substantial enough, it should be a great piece of DLC to expand upon the game. After a delay of about 1 week, the boomer shooter Relentless Frontier releases Episode 1 in early access this week, a fast-paced first-person shooter running on the GZ Doom engine. You are fighting everything from alien bugs to energy cultists and super soldiers as you try to save the planet, but to be honest, it doesn't look like it has any particularly unique distinguishing point and might just fall in the simple but well-executed bin of indie games. For some reason, we have not one but two sliding puzzle games this week, the second of which is Slider, in which you are sliding around chunks of the world in order to access new parts to explore. However, rather than sliding the tile you are on, like in Arranger mentioned earlier, you pull up an artifact so that you can reconfigure the world with secrets to uncover and mysteries to solve. This will also be completely free, so why not give it a go? There are quite a number of digital tabletop games, ones which attempt to recreate the D&D experience to varying levels of success, with another such entry being Tales of Fablecraft. It looks like they've thought of everything for you to have the tabletop experience with friends but online, including integrated video chat and interactive battle maps, as well as character and enemy tokens on screen, so it is not as abstract. The cool part about this is that the base game is free to play, which includes a starter adventure and 130 unique assets, so you can hop in to try, with I believe future adventures to be paid and could be neat.
What? How? What? Why did you do that?
There are also quite a number of philosophical puzzle games on Steam that takes you through various questions from philosophy like the trolley problem, Schrodinger's cat and more, with Thought Experiment Simulator having a comedic spin on things and looks to be different enough to be worth checking out. Fans of the channel will know that I've been shouting out the Toree 3D games wherever I can, since they are neat 3D platformers that are very affordable and harken back to a simpler time, with Toree's Panic Pack being yet another release in the series. However, this is 3 separate tiny games rather than one contiguous experience that builds upon itself, which can be good in its own right in terms of mechanic variety. Here's another title that I have my eye on in Wéko the Mask Gatherer, a third-person behind-the-back action-adventure game in which our hero is on a quest to collect 7 primordial masks, battling enemies and bosses along the way. It looks neat, if a little simple, and does look very Zelda-inspired, so if you're craving a game like this, do give it a look. There was a time in the early 2000s in which desktop virtual pets were all the rage, where you had a little creature that lived on your desktop that you could interact with, and Weyrdlets will bring that back in 2024. Interestingly, your pet has its own little program window and home island to live in, which you can customize and build out, but you can also drag the creature out of said window onto your desktop where it will wander about. They have built-in productivity tools like a Pomodoro timer to hopefully keep you on task while gamifying it, and it simply looks adorable. This one's for indie game developers. The free indie game marketing resources are ready, so sign up via the link in the description below to get it in your mailbox. This week also brings us the release of the highly anticipated Conscript, a game which was kickstarted ages ago but did capture hearts and minds at the time, which has rolled over into anticipation in terms of pure Steam wishlist numbers. This is set in the trenches of World War I, following a soldier in search of his missing brother having to deal with the horrors of war along the way. On top of PTSD and the constant rain of mortar and gunfire, he has to deal with actual enemy soldiers in the trenches and their deadly weapons, along with possible use of chemical weapons that makes it difficult to differentiate reality from hallucinations. The PS1 inspired art style has to be the highlight, which has become more common in recent years, but it still looks well done, so I hope the survival horror end of things holds up. Another game which I have my eye on is Lost Castle 2, the sequel to a game from 2016, and it shows since it looks so much better, so let's hope the gameplay portion is great as well. This is a side-scrolling roguelite beat-em-up with a fantasy theme in which you are battling goblins and golems, playing as a knight, archer, mage and so on, with co-op support and meta progression in between runs when you die. The original is somewhat of a cult classic and has a large number of fans, so hopefully this blows away expectations and could be something special. Developer Ironhide Game Studio keeps chugging along, the certified flash game legend which blew up all those many years ago with the original Kingdom Rush, and after spin-offs and other IP, Kingdom Rush 5 Alliance TD is out this week. A great evil has arisen, and it comes down to the most unlikely of alliances to save the day, between the human army of Lunaria and the Dark Army, which means you can do things like bring 2 heroes into battle or to merge different types of towers together. The core unit summoning lane-based tower defense action is still present, and they have been remarkably consistent with their art style, and going by the pedigree should be a good game as well. I'm excited to share this next title since we have the 1.0 release of Frontier Hunter Urza's Wheel of Fortune, a Metroidvania that I've been itching to play since it sure looks like Bloodstained Ritual of the Night to me. Yes, that means it has enemy inspiration, but in 2.5D rather than pixel art or hand-drawn, having a unique 3-character setup which you can switch between in combat to pull off sick combos. The world mixes sci-fi and fantasy, so that means swords and giant scorpions with guns and airships, with an extensive crafting system as well, and will be for fans of the genre. I'm a fan of the survival RTS They Are Billions, which just swarms you with an incomprehensible number of enemies, with another game in a similar vein being Cataclysmo, in which you lead expeditions out into the mist to push back against the creatures of darkness, constructing giant citadels to aid in your defense. Interestingly, the construction portion of the game is fairly in-depth, since you are literally building up walls block by block, and if I'm not wrong, the taller your wall, the harder the blocks at the bottom become, presumably due to being compressed by gravity or something, so it has that kind of depth with a cool look as well, although we'll have to see how much content there is in early access. Watch this video for the best games of 2024 so far.